Jazakallah khair, everybody, for waiting. Alhamdulillah. And Jazakallah khair for being here. I really appreciate you guys coming out. You know, I think it really means a lot when you guys come and spend your Friday night here to learn something. It shows that you're a growth-oriented individual who wants to take away some points that you can actually use in your life to benefit yourself. So may Allah reward you for your intentions. And let's, set our intentions. I mean, we all have an intention for being here, perhaps some worldly reasons as well as some reasons for the sake of Allah. So let's just remind ourselves of our intentions and, even your worldly intentions, like if you want to be in better health and fitness and you want to inspire your kids, you want to have more energy, you can still route that as being for the sake of Allah. So we always want to kind of remember that because obviously we're at the masjid. So it's a reminder that we're in the house of Allah to make that part of our intention. So I want to get an idea so I can really make this specific for everybody here. Who here already works out pretty regularly and you're into fitness? Okay, perfect, mashallah. And of those who raise their hand, who would say you're at an advanced level? And then who's more of a beginner level? And who's more intermediate level? Okay, nice. So we have a good mix. Then who here doesn't work out and isn't really into fitness? So somewhat beginner. Okay, cool. So everybody here already works out, mashallah, Allahumma barak, because otherwise I have to spend the first 30 minutes motivating you guys to work out. So alhamdulillah, and that's good that you guys are already consistent. So for a lot of people here, it's probably more about like optimizing what you're already doing, right? Who here wants to optimize what you're already doing and make it better, inshallah? Okay, perfect, that's everybody, Allahumma barak. Okay, and then who here is the main goal to lose body fat and lose weight, as opposed to gaining weight, gaining muscle? Okay, who here the main goal is to gain muscle? And who here, maybe it's a combination of both? Okay, so actually most people are a combination. It sounds like it's kind of towards the muscle growth side, but it's like you want to stay at the same weight, but gain muscle and lose fat kind of at the same time. Is that right? Okay, perfect, mashallah. All right, awesome, well that's perfect. So we actually have a good advanced group here, mashallah, that's great. And then who here feels like nutrition is the biggest area where you need help? Okay, nice. And who here feels like the exercise side of things or your training is where you need the most help? Okay, so it's a mix. And then how about just consistency overall with both? Okay, so it's a mix of all three common areas. So inshallah, we can make it very comprehensive. There's gonna be a bit of a unique seminar because instead of like a specific curriculum that I'm coming in with, I actually wanna make it really applicable to the questions that you guys have. So we're gonna spend a little more time on Q&A than we normally would. But it's great that you guys are all here to grow and improve yourselves this summer with your fitness. So before we begin, does anybody have any burning questions or something you really wanna make sure I cover in the seminar today? Yes. Getting more protein? Okay, eating more protein, perfect. And what would you say is the biggest obstacle that you faced so far with getting enough protein? Okay, so no dairy. How to get protein without eating dairy, and then I'll talk about protein overall. Who else struggles with getting your protein in consistently? Okay, one person. Okay, nice, mashallah. So let's start there, right? Why is it important that we eat enough protein every single day for the purposes of gaining muscle, losing fat, and having a better body? Well, protein has a couple benefits. Number one, protein is great for your metabolism and it helps you to build muscle. And the more muscle that you build, the faster your metabolism becomes and the more dietary flexibility you have while achieving your goals more efficiently, and the better you're gonna look at any given weight as far as your physique, the more strength and endurance and performance you're gonna have. Everything improves when we consistently eat our protein. However, just eating chicken every single day can be a little bit challenging if you don't have that variety, and so it's really important that we get a good variety of sources in. In addition to this, if our goal is to get and stay lean and not gain a bunch of weight, we can't be doing fatty sources of protein like lamb, 80-20 beef, and all these other things that have a ton of calories. And likewise, for those who want to stay away from meat or not eat as much meat, we also have to be careful because a lot of vegetarian protein sources have crazy amounts of calories from other sources. For instance, beans, lentils, all these types of things have a lot of carbs. In fact, they're more of a carb source than a protein source. So we have to be very careful. Otherwise, you're gonna end up overeating your calories elsewhere. So maybe you're hitting your protein, but you're gonna gain a bunch of weight. I had a client who was in his 70s and he read that when you're older, you have to eat more protein. So he started eating peanut butter every day and he gained 12 pounds. And he came to me and he said, I need to lose 12 pounds. And so he signed up and I just asked him what he was eating, cleaned up his diet, and he lost 12 pounds in like 5 weeks, mashallah, which is faster than most people in their 20s lose it, and he was in his 70s. And it's simply because he was eating the wrong types of protein. So you gotta be careful. Also, we have some sisters who are talking in the back. If you wanna talk, please go to the other room because it's distracting from the seminar. So all of you who are talking, either remain silent or leave the room, please. Thank you. So, when it comes to our protein sources, we have to be very selective and account for the other calories that we're consuming with that protein. So the best thing that you can do if you want to keep the protein sources lean and not consume excess calories from other sources is you want to stick with sources like chicken breast, egg whites, which I know sounds boring in comparison to all the other things like eggs, which have a lot of fat in them as well, or the fattier cuts of chicken. But we do have to be careful because if we overdo it, then again, those extra calories are going to cause some problems. But there are some hacks that you can use. For instance, let's say that you really like eating fatty beef, like 80-20 beef, right? It's very readily available, it's easy to find, you can get it at any halal store, but the problem is it has more fat than it even has protein. So one thing that you can actually do is you can buy a fattier ground beef, you can actually cook it and then drain out the oil. And that will make a big difference as far as making it leaner, especially because it's kind of hard to find halal lean beef. So another thing you can do if you want to take it a step further but also sacrifice some flavor is you can actually rinse that ground beef, and that kind of kills the flavor, so you have to add the flavor back in with seasoning. But there's a lot of ways to do this, so it depends on how extreme you want to take it. And there are some recipes, like for instance pasta with beef sauce, that's very easy to make even with that flavorless beef when you wash out all the fat, because the great thing is it's basically pure protein. It's 97% lean beef when you wash out all that fat, but again, you have to add the flavor. So if you do it with tomato sauce, it still tastes very good. So these are some examples of ways that we can get our protein in. But again, lean meat is always going to be the best source of protein. Dairy is great, but obviously, as the sister mentioned, she can't eat dairy, and that's totally fine. There's plenty of options outside of dairy. One thing that even people who might be lactose intolerant can still sometimes consume is whey protein isolate, because even though it comes from dairy, it doesn't have the lactose in it. However, a whey protein concentrate might cause issues. And then of course, there are plant protein powders, which are still very viable because even though they tend to have more calories from other sources than, whey protein isolate, at least it still has a very good amount of protein that we can use to get it in. And then of course, there's eggs, egg whites. These are other sources that we can incorporate to get your daily protein. And then if you really struggle to get your protein in, you can also experiment with going a little bit lower in proteins and still see if your results are good. There are some people who actually have really good genetics where they don't need nearly as much protein as the average person, but there are also people who need far more protein than the average person. For instance, for myself, I actually need a lot of protein. Like most people my body weight would only need to eat 200 grams of protein a day. I have to eat 250 to 300. Thankfully though, I love meat, so it's very easy for me to get that in. It's just a matter of keeping the fats down. So it really depends on the person. Yes? Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a concern for a lot of people is like, oh, is it healthy to be eating this much meat? And the thing is that even if you're consuming, lean sources of protein that have a high amount of cholesterol, that dietary cholesterol doesn't always influence your blood cholesterol. However, high saturated fat is definitely going to influence your blood cholesterol. And also, if we allow our body fat percentage to become high, that also increases our cholesterol. And some people just genetically have high cholesterol, but it may not necessarily cause issues for them. That being said though, fish is a great way to switch it up and obviously get that protein in without being worried about cholesterol, especially if we're cooking for certain family members who might be more overweight to where they're already high cholesterol and you want to be really careful for them. So fish is definitely a great source, but if you're keeping the meats very lean, there's less worry about the cholesterol. Same thing with egg whites. And egg whites are very versatile. Like for instance, all the recipes that you were looking at with the cottage cheese that you can't do because of the dairy, you could use egg whites in a lot of these recipes to make like really delicious stuff. But yeah, you do have to kind of rotate the different protein sources. And again, as long as you're keeping the saturated fats low, you shouldn't have to worry about cholesterol too much. But at the same time, I understand for certain family members, they may be very sensitive to cholesterol, so you gotta be careful with those red meats. Well, yeah, absolutely. And any other questions you guys have, please let me know, inshallah. Now, we had some new people come in. I just wanted to check, for those who just came in, would you consider yourself, the two brothers right here, would you consider yourselves more of beginner, intermediate, or advanced when it comes to fitness? Advanced? Perfect, mashallah. Intermediate? Mashallah. Okay, perfect, awesome. So we have a really good group here, mashallah. It's great. Okay, and then any other burning questions? Because honestly, this is the spirit of what I want. I want you guys to have as many Q&A as possible. Yes? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so having daily energy levels, so energy levels aren't the best. Okay, how many hours per night do you sleep? 7. Okay, so it's not sleep, because sometimes people come in and they think it's their diet, but it's their sleep, so in your case, not necessarily. Okay, and what does a typical day of eating look like for you?
Late breakfast, then dinner, and I snack.
Okay, yeah, so there's not a lot of structure on that, and your blood sugar's probably all over the place, which is part of why you feel the need to snack and why your energy levels aren't good. So what I'd recommend is early in the morning, get a lean source of protein and some fruit. Now, this is gonna be a little bit, different from what you're used to, because right now you're used to having a late breakfast, but a lot of the times people fall into this pattern where they kind of tend to eat late and they snack and then they have a big dinner, stuff like that. And this is a very common pattern that's really bad for your energy levels, for your blood sugar, for your metabolism. I mean, there's a lot of negative effects of this. So one of the best ways to solve this is to get in a good source of lean protein, whether it's a protein shake. It could be egg as well, although egg has a lot of fat relative to protein. Or you could also do 0% Greek yogurt. And these are some easy protein sources in the morning, because most people don't necessarily have an appetite for meat in the morning. And then from there, that's the most important part, but you could also add a little bit of fruit to that. And if you have that with a little bit of fruit, you're gonna notice that your energy levels start better early in the day. You're also gonna notice that you have a little more appetite early in the day, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, some people have a huge appetite to where it's a problem for them. But from there, you wanna make sure that you have a really solid lunch. So for lunch, we're talking like a good, 6 to 8 ounces of a lean meat like chicken breast, right? Something that's gonna give you really good energy, a good fiber source for digestion, potentially some healthy fats, like 5 to 10 grams of healthy fat, whether that's avocado, whether that's olive oil, right? And then a 40 to 50 gram portion of clean complex carbs, whether that's, sweet potato is one of the best. It could be basmati rice or brown rice, although some people get, bloated and more tired from that. But something like sweet potato, as long as you digest it well, will do really well. Even regular potato can be really, really good for this. And between that breakfast and lunch, you're gonna notice that your blood sugar is a lot more stable, because again, you're getting that protein and healthy carbs into your system, the micronutrients early in the day. You can also add a little bit of egg to that breakfast, like 1 or 2 eggs with those lean proteins. And if you want to eat a whole omelet, obviously if your appetite increases in the morning, you could also have 8 ounces of egg whites with 1 to 2 eggs. But let's say that you have no appetite, you're not used to eating early. Literally, if you have 1 or 2 boiled eggs that you pre-boil earlier in the week with a protein shake and a piece of fruit, you're gonna have a ton of energy early in the day, because you got your healthy fats in a moderate quantity, your protein, your clean carbs. Boom, lunchtime when you get hungry, have those other things prepared, ready to go. Again, with that little bit of healthy fats, just to kind of make it last a little bit longer without going over on the calories, and to help with nutrient absorption and digestion. And then midway between lunch and dinner, if you do get hungry, I'd recommend Greek yogurt with some frozen berries, maybe a tiny bit of honey, like 1 teaspoon. Really delicious if you need one snack in the middle of the day, but try not to do any other snacks other than that. You can also do cucumbers and like pickles and stuff like that between. And then dinner, then just have a nice, clean dinner similar to what you had for lunch. You're gonna notice with this structure, your energy levels are way better. It might sound very structured, but once you get used to it, you're gonna notice that you really prefer eating this way, because your energy levels are so good that you feel intrinsically motivated to eat this way. And I also have this in writing. If you DM me on Instagram with the word meal plan, I have 3 free meal plan templates. So my Instagram is The Modern Muslim Man, all one word. If you DM me, I have an automatic messaging system that'll send you that. And then you can choose one of the 3 plans that kind of has this very similar format in writing, really optimal for your energy, inshallah. 2 meals just does not work well, because in order to get enough calories on only 2 meals, you're gonna have to eat some pretty big meals. And that's not ideal, because now your digestion isn't gonna be that good, or if you snack a bunch between meals, your blood sugar's kind of all over the place, right? I mean, some people could do well on snacking, but there's a lot of risks with that. So I like to split it and spread it out into 3. You could go for like a month or 2 with 2 meals a day, but if you've been doing it chronically for a really long time, I find that very few people can do that for longer than 1 to 2 months. There's always anomalies, of course. There's always exceptions to every rule. Like literally the meal plan I just gave you guys, it's gonna work for 99% of people. 1% of people, their energy levels will be terrible on it, but 99% of people it's gonna work well. Likewise, I found like 97+% of people should be eating 3 meals a day, maybe a 4th serving of food, like 1 snack. But somebody who's eating just 2 meals, a lot of times their digestion is not going to be good, their bloating is not going to be good, their blood sugar is not going to be very stable, their hormones are going to be all over the place, their stress hormones are going to be up, and they're very prone to snacking, and they're very prone to overeating. So 2 meals a day, for the majority of people, again, there's exceptions, but for the majority of people, it doesn't work that well. Yes? For more than 2 months. MashaAllah. So there's the 3% right there, along Mubarak. MashaAllah. That's good. Yes? Yes, absolutely. So the total calories that somebody should consume varies from person to person. There are formulas where you can calculate, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a completely arbitrary number because, it does have quite a bit of accuracy to it, but there's always going to be exceptions. I mean, you could have a 120-pound woman whose metabolism is faster than a 300-pound man, but for the most part, most 300-pound men are going to burn more calories per day than most 120-pound women, but there's always exceptions, right? So what you can do is you can go to tdeecalculator.net and then plug in your age, your height, and your weight. It's also going to ask you your body fat percentage and activity level, but you don't necessarily have to fill that in unless you have a very accurate measure of your body fat percentage. But activity level, don't even worry about that, because activity level is just going to determine on the next page whether it highlights lightly active, moderately active, whatever. So it's completely arbitrary. The only number that you should care about on the next page is basal metabolic rate. And that's going to tell you roughly where your metabolism should be on average for your age. That being said though, if you've previously done high calorie muscle growth diets, your metabolism will probably be a lot faster than that. And if you've previously done really low calorie weight loss diets and lost more than like 5 to 10% of your body weight, but never did a metabolic recovery phase, you're probably going to be slower than that, especially if you've been doing chronic dieting for a long time. So there's quite a bit of nuance to this, but that's a good number to start with. And then what I recommend is eating roughly around that level and seeing if your weight changes if you weigh yourself every day. After a week, if your weight hasn't changed, then that probably is your maintenance. And now if we want to create a deficit, you could go lower than that, but the thing is that you don't want to go lower than your basal metabolic rate. And I forgot to mention, it's gonna give you the number basal metabolic rate. Obviously, you want to add your activity level to that. So don't necessarily eat directly at that number, but you're going to eat slightly above that level, because that's just one of the 4 components of how many calories you burn per day. There's also how many calories you burn just from existing. Like right now, every time that I move my hand and my foot and my body, I'm burning calories. Every time that you guys move just in general in your seat, you're burning calories. The culmination of all of that non-exercise, movement per day does add up to a significant amount of calories burned. A person who's very slouchy and they don't move a lot and they're kind of just reclining, chilling all the time is going to burn a lot less calories from non-exercise activity, as opposed to somebody who's very fidgety, active, they like to pace up and down, they walk a lot. That person's going to have a much higher amount of just non-exercise calories burned. One of the best ways to track this is with your step count, which you can either track with your phone or a watch, and that's going to give you a pretty good estimate of how many calories you burn from that. So that also needs to be added to your basal metabolic rate. And then there's also the amount of calories you burn when you're actually intentionally working out. And then there's the amount of calories that you're also going to burn just by digesting your food. So for instance, every gram of protein that you eat is going to burn roughly 1 calorie per day. So if you eat 200 grams of protein a day, that's also another 200 calories that you're burning. So I misspoke earlier when I said eat at that number that it gives you for the basal metabolic rate. You're going to eat slightly higher than that. And so again, if you're lightly to moderately active, you could eat about 300 to 500 higher than that, just to see if that's your true maintenance. And if you do maintain your weight that week, that's how you'll know that is your maintenance. If you gain weight that week, you'll know that it's a little bit above your maintenance. And if you lose weight that week, you'll know that it was a little bit below your maintenance. But let's just assume that you maintained your weight at that number that is given you, plus 300 to 500, however many calories roughly you estimate that you burn. At that point, if you want to create a deficit to lose weight, you would want to go about 300 to 500 below that, but don't go below your basal metabolic rate. If you go below your basal metabolic rate, that tends to be too low, and that tends to increase the risk of you slowing down your metabolism prematurely, having low energy levels, all that stuff. However, if we eat at that number, the way we want to create the deficit is by increasing our step count and increasing the amount that we exercise. So for instance, most people on average, if they don't intentionally try to walk, are only going to get about 3,000 steps a day. So that's why setting a target, if you're at 3,000, to try to get 6,000 to 8,000 is going to help you burn a lot more calories, like about 150 to 200 more calories per day. And then once you get used to that, you can increase to 10,000. And then if that's realistic for you, you can even increase to 12,000. A lot of people can even go as high as 15,000, but past that point, it's very easy to kind of overdo it and burn out your body. And there's ways to do this in a time efficient way, like having an under the desk treadmill, taking calls while walking, being more active with your kids, especially those who have young kids, or if your kids are all grown, maybe grandkids, whatever it is, but getting more steps. This can be really beneficial to help increase your activity. And then just going for walks throughout the day. Even just going for a walk after each meal is going to get you, like a 10-minute walk after each meal is going to get you 30 minutes of walking. If you go for a walk after each prayer, you get 50 minutes of walking a day. That's almost an hour. And if you do both, you're getting 80 minutes of walking. That's an hour and 20 minutes, which is amazing. You're going to get about 8,000 steps with that. And if you're already getting 2,000 to 3,000 steps outside of that, there's your 10,000 very easily. So there's a lot of ways to either break it up, or you just go for a long 45 to 60-minute walk in the morning. This is one of the best ways to create a deficit. Don't go below your basal metabolic rate, because again, the risks are too high. Now, as far as exercise, when you're going to the gym, let's say you're going to the gym 3 to 4 days a week, don't necessarily be super obsessed with how many calories am I burning in that session, because usually, I mean, the main purpose of going to the gym is to build muscle, to build strength, to build mobility. But if you're just going to burn calories, that would be more of cardio as opposed to resistance training. But resistance training itself, yes, it increases your metabolism, yes, it burns a bit of calories, but the main purpose is not necessarily the calorie burn, it's more so muscle maintenance, building muscle, getting longevity, mobility, all that stuff. But yeah, that's how you would create a deficit. And then obviously we talked about the benefits of high protein diet before. That'll also increase the amount of calories you burn. Eventually, after you've lost 10 to 20% of your body weight, depending on how much weight you had to lose to begin with, you'll notice that the results slow down, you start getting hungrier, stuff like that. There's a good chance to do a metabolic recovery phase, which kind of ties in with the other part of your question, which is, you know, how would you create a surplus for gaining weight? So when it comes to creating a surplus for gaining weight, you know, it differs from person to person as well, but let's say that you've established your maintenance. One of the best things that you can do to make sure you're only gaining muscle and you're gaining minimal fat, if any fat at all, possibly even losing fat throughout the process for beginners and people with good genetics, is to make sure that when you increase your calories, you don't do it by too much. Now, there's a lot of people who, when they want to bulk up, especially young guys, they're in a rush. They're like, yeah, man, I got 30 days to focus on my fitness. I want to gain 20 pounds. But gaining 20 pounds in 30 days is not going to be a clean 20 pounds. And I've made this mistake multiple times. Dirty bulking. It sounds like a dream. You get to eat whatever you want and you gain weight and you get stronger, but you're going to gain a lot more fat than muscle. And I've had times where I dirty bulked and I gained 80% fat, only 20% muscle, which was terrible. I mean, I ruined my physique, and then I had to spend, you know, months losing that fat, right? So there were also times though when I was really young where it was successful. Like when I was 17, my senior year of high school, I bulked from 170 to 220, and I was eating a lot, probably about, I'd say 4,000 calories a day, maybe more. And there was even a period in college where I got up to like 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day when I was trying to gain weight. And yeah, I would get fat, but when I was young, I could easily lose it. But now the goal is to never get fat, because when you're older, it is a little bit harder to lose that fat. So it's a lot more risky. Like for those who are in high school, you're trying to play football, you know, you could potentially bulk. But even then, if we want to remind ourselves of the Islamic context, the Prophet ﷺ said, 1/3 for food, 1/3 for water, 1/3 to save room for your breath. And that's if you must fill your stomach. So when we look at, is bulking even Islamic? It's not. Stuffing yourself to try to gain weight is not Islamic, and it's not optimal either, because again, you're going to gain excess fat if you go too high. So one of the best ways to bulk in a clean way that's more Islamically aligned is you want to get easy digesting, higher calorie foods. Now this is the opposite of when you're trying to lose weight, is you want foods that are very filling but low calorie. When you're trying to gain weight, you want foods that are not very filling that have high calories. But you want to make sure it's clean, easy digesting food. So in this case, eggs are amazing. Eggs are going to be packed with micronutrients that are really good for gaining muscle, as well as the protein itself and the healthy fats in them, especially high quality eggs. And if you eat a lot of eggs, they tend to digest really well, especially if you do like sunny side up. One of the best ways to just eat a lot of clean calories without overstuffing yourself if you're trying to gain weight. Obviously, for those who are trying to lose weight, you got to limit the eggs to usually 1 to 2 a day because the calories are too much, but it's a great way to gain weight in a moderate way. Same with like avocado, olive oil, honey. These are all foods that are not very filling, that are very calorie dense, they're very healthy. And nuts as well. I used so many nuts when I was bulking when I was younger because the nuts just have so many calories. But the problem is when you're trying to lose weight, these foods are still great because they're healthy, but you have to keep them in very tight moderation. We're talking less than 5 to 10 grams, very small amounts, right? Again, they're great in those small amounts, 5 to 10 grams, but if you exceed that quantity, now you're starting to risk, you know, too many calories, versus when you're trying to gain weight, you know, you can eat quite a bit more, but still we don't want to go more than 300 to 500 above what our maintenance is. Now, this can go a lot deeper, but does that mostly answer your question, or does it lead to any follow-up questions? Okay, we can tie into it later too, though, if anybody else has follow-up questions. I saw your hand next.
I heard a lot of mixed opinions of like whole milk or like 2% milk. What do you think?
Okay, so this ties into another concept when it comes to clean bulking, right? And are you talking about the purposes of muscle growth or for fat loss, or both?
In general, like some people always buy like 1%. I always buy whole milk. I don't know like what's really the difference.
So whole milk has a ton of fat in it. That's the problem for most people, right? Now, for like children who you want them to grow, like for instance, for my 6-year-old, we give him whole milk because he's not, you know, chubby or anything like that, alhamdulillah, and we want him to get those healthy fats so he can grow because we want him to gain weight, right? Versus, let's say that he was a chubby kid, then I would need to be careful and maybe do like a lesser fat milk, right? And unfortunately, childhood obesity is a very real thing. That's, you know, one thing I always remind myself before I give these presentations is that when I teach the parents here about healthy eating, it's going to help the kids to benefit as well. And unfortunately, a lot of kids these days eat so much sugar, but that's a topic for another, you know, day. I'll answer your question, then we can talk about that later. But yeah, so whole milk for most people, I don't recommend it, most adults at least, unless you're trying to gain weight. For gaining weight, it's an excellent food. It's got a crazy amount of calories. It digests pretty fast as long as you're not lactose intolerant or allergic. And if you are, if you get digestive issues, you could do A2 milk. But for those who are trying to lose weight, whole milk should be avoided. There was one time where I got fat just because so I tend to drink a lot of coffee. I'll drink like 3 to 4 cups a day. And during the period where I got fat, the 3 areas where I was adding hidden calories was, one, I was adding whole milk to my coffee. It was grass-fed whole milk, but even just like, a quarter cup of whole milk to each of those cups of coffee was adding quite a bit of calories. I was smothering my food in honey because I was like, oh, it's sunnah, it's healthy, right? Because honey is mentioned in the Quran. But again, what I neglected was the fact that the sunnah encourages moderation, and I was putting a lot of olive oil and oils in general on my food, and I was eating a lot more calories than I thought. So with whole milk, I would definitely recommend it for children, especially if you want them to gain weight, but for adults who are trying to lose weight, definitely not recommended. Cool. Yes? How much do you sleep per night? So we definitely, if you're getting dark circles as a kid, you definitely want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. So make sure you get to bed early. How old are you? 11? MashaAllah. So yeah, make sure you're getting your quality sleep. Make sure that your parents give you a healthy diet with low inflammation foods. Don't eat processed snacks and junk. Make sure you eat always whole foods. For you, definitely milk is great, even whole milk, eggs, avocados, nuts, good, high quality meats. These things are great, but avoid all those processed junks because they're going to cause inflammation, and that could potentially lead to the dark circles plus the sleep. Yes?
How do you structure your workouts as far as just when you're trying to gain strength and then also trying to balance it out with like cardio?
That's a wonderful question. So the ideal structure for a workout is you're going to start with 5 to 10 minutes of just, mobility work. And for some people, especially if you're older, we want maybe 10 to 20 minutes of mobility work. And that's just really important to get your body ready, especially if you sit a lot and you work at an office job, in front of a desk or whatever it may be. I mean, even if not, we're on our phones all the time, so our posture always needs work. So I always have people start with 5 to 10 minutes of foam rolling and 5 to 10 minutes of dynamic active stretching, or a warm-up that I call the ISO positions, which if you DM me on Instagram with the word posture, the automatic message system will send you a 2-part free warm-up that shows you how to do both those things, which is going to be super helpful. And those are on my YouTube channel. So always start with those. And if you do it very efficiently, it'll take you about 10 minutes roughly to do that. And that sets the foundation for you to just have better muscular activation, do everything more safely, everything. From there, you want to prioritize your main strength movement, and you want to warm up to it. Start with a light weight, work your way up to your main strength movement, and then on a weekly basis, depending on how advanced you are on that particular lift, in the beginning, you could add 5 to 10 pounds a week on that lift until it gets hard for you to add that much, and you want to operate usually within the same rep range. At that point, it gets a little bit more complex. But in the beginning, you just want to keep increasing. And then once you've increased and you can't really add a whole lot of weight anymore, you can stay at the same weight and increase the reps, the sets, everything else. Once you maybe tap that out, you can start to reduce the rest periods. And once you've kind of tapped every variable, and even when you switch up the variable that you're trying to increase, the lift doesn't go up anymore. You got to switch up the movement for 4 to 12 weeks with a similar movement that's a bit different, and then come back to that movement, and it's like a fresh stimulus for your body again. So that's the strength movement, kind of like a weekly and monthly progression. And then when it comes to after the strength movement, you might have a secondary strength movement, depending on how much time you have in the session and what type of goals you're trying to pursue. Let's say it's the same muscle group, or let's say you're doing 3 days a week, you would want to train whole body days. That's another point, is if you're training only 3 days a week, you usually have to do whole body days. Versus if you're training 4, you want to split it into upper lower. If you're doing 5, you could split it into like bodybuilder split. So 1 day for legs, 1 day for chest, 1 day for back, 1 day for shoulders, 1 day for arms. And if you're doing 6 days a week, for most people that's a little bit excessive, but you could go push, pull legs, push, pull legs. So those are the ways I like to split it. But most people, 4 is the most optimal. And within that 4, you want 2 upper body days and 2 lower body days. That's usually what's going to be the most optimal. But yeah, as far as structure goes, so after you've done your 1 to do strength exercises, from there what we want to do is the assistance exercises. So that usually supports the same muscle group. So you're doing, more so isolation exercises that work those groups. So let's say that your main strength movement was bench press for chest, or a dumbbell incline bench for chest. Your follow-up movements, you might do a second press variation. Like let's say that you did flat bench for your first one, you might want to do incline for your next one. Let's say you did incline for your first one because you want to emphasize upper chest, then you would do flat for your second one. Then we want to get into the assistance movements. So the assistance movements that would support a bench pressing type motion would be chest flies, tricep push downs, even some rear delts. I always like to put rear delts, so that's the muscle in the back of your shoulder right here. after, between sets of chest actually, because, you know, we're always so tight in the front here because of computer posture and everything else, that if you only do a chest day, you can get so tight here. So I always like to balance out with some light rear delt action as well between every set of bench. That way you're still keeping your posture balanced. Same thing whenever you do any kind of leg exercise or deadlift, squats, anything else, your lower back's taking a lot. So I like to do ab exercises between those, just light ab exercises, so you're working the front as well as the back, you're keeping the joints balanced. So that's a principle I like to apply to everything as well. Whatever movement you're doing, you want to balance it out with an opposing movement, right? But yeah, taking it back to, you know, the structure of a workout. So you got your warm-ups, your main 1 to 2 strength exercises, your assistance lifts that support the muscle groups that you're working that day. And then after that, if you have time, that's when's the best time to do cardio. Now, why don't we do cardio at the beginning? Because cardio is going to burn your energy when it doesn't really require that much focus, to where you're not going to be able to get as good of focus, performance, pump, energy into all your strength exercises. So the reason we do it this way is that if you do your mobility first, that prepares you for your strength lift. You do your strength lift when you're the most fresh, and then that strength lift also activates all the muscles that we hit with the isolation lift. And at the end of the session, when you're super tired, you get the cardio. So now you've already burnt all the carbs in your system from the training, and now you're just burning pure fat when you're doing that, you know, cardio afterwards. Or you can split up the cardio and do it separately. So like one thing some people will do is before breakfast, they'll do a bit of cardio, especially if your cortisol, your stress hormone levels are low. If you have high stress, high cortisol, your sleep isn't that good, I don't recommend doing fasted cardio because it's gonna make your cortisol, your stress hormone worse. But if you're getting pretty good sleep, your stress is well controlled, you're living a pretty stable, moderate lifestyle, you're not stressed out, your body's responding pretty well, you could do fasted cardio in the morning, then eat 1 to 2 meals, then do your strength training session. Or another thing you can do is you could just go for a morning walk, right? Nothing crazy, low impact. Get your session kind of, you know, either in the early morning or middle of the day after you've had some food. It's always good to have some food before strength training session for most people. Some people train fasted, but most people need food. And then you can go for walks later in the day or do cardio later in the day, really depending on how, you know, things look. For myself personally, I mean, if I'm planning on taking 2 showers that day, I might do 2 sessions. But if I only want to take 1 shower that day, then usually what I'll do is I'll just go for walks for cardio during the day, because I usually hit an average of about 15,000 steps a day, every day. And then if I want to do a dedicated cardio, I'll do that after my strength training session before I shower, so that I'm getting the most out of it. And so I only have to take 1 shower. So that was very in-depth answer to your question, but I hope that answered it. Any follow-up questions on any of the points that I brought up? Okay, perfect. If you think of anything, let me know, inshallah. See, this is exactly what I wanted, is Q&A. Yes? So bands are really good, and they have a lot of benefits. They're portable. You can get a pretty good workout. You can replicate most of the movements with weights. But bands also have some limitations, because unless you have a really comprehensive set of bands, the jump in weights between them might be a little bit too much to get a proper progressive overload, which means every session where you're adding a small amount of weight, sometimes it can be hard to progress with bands. That being said though, bands are generally good for beginners, because beginners can just increase the reps until they're doing so many reps with the weight and then go up to the next band. That's one way of doing it. Also, beginners don't really need a whole lot of specific targeted stimulus. They just need to generally work out to get the results. And they're great for maintenance as well. But for somebody who's more advanced, who's really trying to take it to the next level and really tightly control the process, usually weights are a bit better because you can increase more incrementally and you have a lot more control. But bands still have benefits for advanced people. They're great for stretching. They're great for warming up and activating certain muscles. They can be good for finishing off a muscle. They're good for home gyms where maybe people can have like some weights but can't necessarily have a full cable setup, but they still want to get some of those cable type movements. After they've done the strength movements, it's a good way to finish off the muscle or even activate or pre-exhaust the muscle. So they have a lot of benefits. And usually the type of person, so beginners again could use bands for the whole workout. Anybody could use them to maintain but not necessarily see crazy progress. And then somebody who's more advanced could use them to maybe finish off the muscle, activate, or warm up the muscle. Okay, I saw 1, 2, 3. 1. Well, I saw your hand first, so yeah. And we'll go through, yeah.
So I used to be a weight class athlete, so I like very intense cardio.
Uh-huh.
but I'm also a personal trainer and I know how important social cardio is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very bored and I'm trying to figure out how to switch up my routine so that I am hitting all of the muscle groups that I properly should be, but also enjoying my workouts because I know if they're not fun, I'm not going to want to stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions aside from like just doing walks? Walks are great, but I'm tired of walking all the time.
Okay. Well, one suggestion to make the walks more entertaining would be listening to podcasts, getting other work done while you're walking. See, for me, I'd say the three, well, there's a lot of things I like to do while I'm walking. I like to take calls while I'm walking. I like to do Zoom meetings while I'm walking if I'm using the under the desk treadmill. I like to even use it just to make my work more interesting. Obviously, there's some work that you can't really do while you're walking on a thing. When I'm responding to messages, I like to do my walks. I also like to go for a podcast and just get some space. I like to plan. Like what I'll do is I'll go for a walk, I'll pull out ChatGPT and I'll start just messaging it with voice message and kind of brainstorming things and planning things. So these are all things you can do to make the walks a lot more enjoyable. But what you can do on top of that is if you want a more dedicated workout where you're doing, you're getting your heart rate up, you're getting your cardio, you could do some circuit training. This is a fun way to switch it up. I mean, obviously your heart rate's going to be quite a bit higher than if you were walking. Another thing you could do is you could shorten your rest periods in your normal strength training sessions where you're still getting enough time to recover, so 60 to 90 seconds or even 45 to 60 seconds. So you're keeping your heart rate elevated, but you're still getting good performance on your strength. But I mean, if I were in your position, I would just find more entertaining things to do during the walks, and then within the sessions, try to find ways to keep my heart rate elevated. Another thing that I did when I was kind of bored with strength training and I was starting to get into boxing is between sets of strength training, I would go hit the bag, and that was super fun. And I still do that sometimes, especially if I want to keep my heart rate up and I need long rest periods. So these are all some ways that you can kind of keep the heart rate elevated and get that, zone 2, sometimes tap it into zone 3 cardio. But yeah, I would say, and then another thing too is like you can explore other forms of zone 2 cardio, like whether it's other cardio machines, whether it's hiking, making things more interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to do it on a daily basis, hopefully you can find things to multitask with the walking, but if not, you can incorporate it within the strength training sessions too to help you switch it up.
So like supersetting during my lifts, maybe a little bit more, increase my heart rate a bit more.
Exactly, as long as it doesn't interfere with the performance of the lift itself. And yes, and what you could also do is you could superset things that don't necessarily interfere with performance. So for instance, so like what are some exercises that you typically need a good amount of rest period and that you really prioritize performance on?
Deadlift, squat, bench, like I really like cardios and SBLs, and I know that I'm typically pretty gassed after that, so trying to superset another larger movement is just it's not going to work properly.
Yeah, I mean with those, your heart rate's already going to be elevated, and how long of a rest period do you usually take between those?
Usually until I feel recovered. I try to work at like 2 reps in reserve and then rest like 30 to 90 seconds. I've been doing a lot more
Wow.
research on just like optimal rest periods, but from being in the fitness industry that you can find a research study to support anything almost. So I've just been playing with things and trying to figure out what works best for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, 30 to 90 seconds is already a very short rest between those things, so your heart rate's probably already staying pretty elevated. Let's say that you were doing like a powerlifter rest period, like 3 to 5 minutes, where you're like taking a nap between sets. That's the case where we might want to do maybe some ab exercises between sets of squat and deadlift to keep your heart rate up, or some rear delt or pulling exercises between sets of bench to get blood flow into the back, which helps with stability as well. Or again, in my case, sometimes I just get bored between sets and I go hit the bag, or I'll pace back and forth in the gym and send voice messages to people and stuff like that. So there's always things to do. Okay, and then I think I saw your hand next.
I walk a lot, so my sister is a bit trying to convince me to, I don't know if it's a big trend or not, but weighted vest. Is that something popular thing now, or is that good for walking posture?
So I've considered doing it to just burn more calories. But I one time had a non-Muslim friend. He was an Italian guy who was actually ironically in the military, somebody I knew from the gym. And one time the cops pulled him over while he was going for a run with his weighted vest because they thought that it was, something dangerous. So that's, I think, one thing that has always held me back from doing it because I'm kind of scared as a Muslim with a big beard that somebody's going to call the cops. But also, I don't really think it's necessary. I mean, yeah, it'll get you to burn more calories, but it might kind of kill the enjoyment of the walk. So So I would say, I mean, for walking posture, I don't necessarily know if it would improve the posture per se. I mean, if anything, it might weigh down on your posture a little bit. What you could do, I mean, I've done this before too, is carry some weights while I'm going for a walk, but even then it kind of kills the enjoyment of the walk, because part of why walking is so great is it's sustainable and enjoyable. So, but if you want to gain like strength and posture benefits, I would just get in some strength training. It could be body weight, it could be with weights, but something that you could do. Another thing that could make your walks more interesting is, you know, at certain intervals on your walk, you can do some push-ups. That's something I actually started doing just for fun recently. I saw that was a challenge and a trend, and I got really motivated by it, so I started trying it. So I'm enjoying it so far. Let's see if it ends up being beneficial or not, or you could just go for normal walks. Yeah.
So I like to, so I gained a good amount of muscle like maybe a year or two ago when I was consistently going to the gym. And because when I go to the gym, you know, you're motivated about other people, you're there for, you're not going to go for 5 minutes, you're still going to do a full workout. But I don't like going to the gym anymore, so I do it at home, but I find a lack of like motivation to do a full set of workout. And my goal is the same. I don't want to gain too much muscle or any muscle. I just kind of want to gain a little bit and maintain it. So what is your recommendation of like per week, you know, just for maintaining a good amount of muscle, and how long per day should I lift? I have like a few weights at home.
So, I mean, it's going to depend on the person, but I think to help motivate yourself, what you could do is you can listen to some podcasts about working out and fitness while you're working out. Like for me personally, I used to be really dependent on my environment to be motivated. And certainly if I'm in an awesome working out environment, I do get more motivated, but I didn't want to be dependent on that. I want it to be like, if I'm in the gym by myself, not even listening to a podcast on my headphones, that I'm motivated. But there are some days where you just don't really feel motivated, where you need a podcast regardless. And it's really interesting to learn about training concepts from like reputable, you know, experts in the field. So that would be one thing that could potentially increase your motivation for it. But as far as like what's the minimalist way to maintain the progress you've already seen, I mean, you could get it done in like 15 to 20 minutes 3 times a week. As long as you're hitting a leg, a push, and a pull exercise each session. You can even superset the 3 of them if you want to get it done faster. It really doesn't take much to maintain. I mean, I've had people even maintain with just body weight, right? Just squats, push-ups, and swimmers, which is a floor exercise where you basically, I have videos of it on my thing. I don't want to mess up the microphone or anything, but actually I'll just show you guys so you get an idea. I did this in the last seminar too, the Ramadan one. But basically, what you do is you start here, you bring your hands in front, out to the sides, out here, and so it's a nice home exercise that you can do from anywhere with no equipment that works your back. Of course, if you have dumbbells, you can do pulling exercises, but it's a good way to kind of, you know, hit your back, because you want to hit, you know, legs, push, pull each session if you're doing 3. But yeah, I would say that's the best minimalist, is 3 times a week, 15 to 20 minutes, legs, push, pull. You can switch up the exercises, so you're getting 3 different exercises for each of the 3 different days, and you should be able to maintain, inshallah. Yes? That's a good question. So you could keep it maintenance and recomp as long as you're eating clean and training properly and, you know, getting a good step count. But sometimes recomp can be very slow, especially after the first 1 to 2 months. So at that point, you might want to specialize. Are you very consistent right now with your workouts, or not super consistent? Okay. So the first 1 to 2 months, you could pretty much recomp just by being consistent. And then at that point, you'll have a better idea of whether you want to prioritize muscle growth or fat loss, and that's the point where you need to specialize. Most of the time, by that point, most people want to prioritize fat loss, because it's kind of like, you know, that's what's really going to show your gains the best, unless you've already just naturally lost as much fat as you want to lose by that point. But you'll have a better idea after 1 to 2 months when the results on recomping slow down. But yeah, I would just keep it at maintenance, keep it really clean. You could even do a slight deficit, because I mean, if you're just starting, you will still gain muscle in a deficit because you're a beginner, so you have those newbie gains. But if that's hard for you, you can also just do, you know, maintenance. But I would just say start making healthy food choices, as far as like getting a good amount of protein with your breakfast, with some healthy carbs, and a small serving of like 5 to 10 grams of healthy fats, which again, like an egg has about 4 to 6 grams of healthy fats depending on how big the yolk is. So 1 to 2 eggs with, you know, whatever else you're doing. Or if you're doing something like egg whites, you could do egg whites with like, you know, half an avocado on some sourdough toast. That's a really popular and delicious breakfast. I think I actually had that this morning. So with some oatmeal too, because I was carving up for my lift. But, you know, these types of things, you know, every meal, a good serving of like, you know, 30 to 50 grams of clean protein, 30 to 50 grams of complex carbs, 5 to 10, maybe as high as 15 grams of healthy fats, but usually like 5 to 10. And then, a snack between those is a good start. I mean, that's going to be more of a deficit. For most, men versus for a woman, it's probably going to be about maintenance if you're in the middle of that range. But that would get you pretty good results. And if you want to go a little bit higher than that, you could do 4 meals, or you could increase the meal size a little bit. If you said, hey, you know what, I kind of want to focus more on the gains as opposed to like leaning out. But yeah, right around maintenance would be the best for your goal.
And a follow-up question. So I think what I struggle with the most as far as diet goes is putting up sugar. I felt like very fit. I'm not sure if this is a problem you've experienced, but what do you think the best way, like best methodology would to be like going about cutting out sugar gradually? Because I tried going, like cold turkey. Like I felt like I had some withdrawals. Like,
Oh, for sure.
what's your take on that? How should I gradually cut it out?
Yeah, so there's been times in my life where I was somewhat addicted to sugar as well. And so if you go cold turkey, the first 3 days are going to be the hardest, but by day 4, you'll start to feel better. And by day 14, you're going to feel amazing. But you also can't just go and like not eat enough protein or complex carbs, because that's one of the root causes of sugar cravings. So I'll just quickly wrap this up, and then I think it's time for the adhan, and then we can, okay, cool. So basically, there's 5 root causes of sugar cravings. And I'm going to see if I can remember all of them. The first one tends to be high stress. So when people are stressed, their sugar cravings tend to go up. The second one is sleep deprivation, which is pretty common at this time of year because Isha is late, Fajr is pretty early. So if you're getting less than 7 hours of sleep per night, working on your sleep quality and quantity is a great way to improve the sugar cravings. The third one is not getting enough protein and complex carbs during the day to where your blood sugar is not consistent, so it's causing those dips. So I was telling one of the brothers earlier about how to get a consistent diet for your energy levels and your blood sugar, which I have, and I was telling the brother, I think this was before you came, on my Instagram, I have 3 free diet templates that all help to knock these sugar cravings out. And one of them is actually optimized specifically for getting rid of sugar cravings, versus the other ones have some other specific optimizations. But if you DM me on Instagram with the word meal plan, I have an automatic system that'll send you a message with all 3 meal plans in it, or with an option that you select which one, and then it gives you the meal plan. And my Instagram is the modern Muslim man, all one word. So if you DM me meal plan 2 words, it's 2 separate words, boom, it should send it. And then, the fourth root cause of sugar cravings is if you eat sugar early in the day, it spikes your blood sugar, and then your blood sugar crashes, and that makes you crave more sugar. And I can't remember what the 5th one was, but I have videos on this on my Instagram too. So those are the root causes of sugar cravings. And if you solve all those, it should make it a lot easier for you to transition off, especially with the right meal plan. That's one of the best ones. So get good sleep, manage your stress, get those protein and complex carbs during the day. Don't eat sugar early in the day, and if you have to satisfy the sugar craving, have Greek yogurt with some frozen berries. One of the best ways to knock out the sugar cravings. Like when I first started, there was a time where I started a diet at a period where I was really addicted to like snacking, especially on like carby, sugary things. So that was a game changer, because sometimes between meals I would get lightheaded because I was craving sugar, and I was like, oh, it's so bad. So what I would do is I would take the Greek yogurt with berries, and then once I got used to it and my blood sugar kind of got more stable, I didn't need that anymore, but it was a great snack between meals that helped with that. So
just to reiterate, you think going cold turkey, like just hustling out the first 4 days, is a good way to go about it, and just
it's one of the ways of going about it, but it's going to depend on the person, and you are going to be pretty miserable for 3 days. So I would say get these other 4 foundations down first, see if that's enough. If it's not enough, you'll at least have a better foundation to go cold turkey and be less miserable. Yes. What's that?
So, my grandparents, I want them to get into like exercising more and everything. How do you think they should start, like resistance bands or weightlifting? Once grandpa's 70 or almost 80, and my grandma is almost 70. So, how do you think I should like almost start with that?
So this is definitely a delicate situation, because you don't want to get them weightlifting, especially heavy weights from the beginning, because their joints and their bones and joints may be brittle, and they may have a high proneness to injury. Obviously, if they're already active, they're already working out, maybe you could get them directly into that. But because they're starting pretty much sedentary, definitely get them going for walks first. That's one of the best first things to do. In fact, so there's something that happens to most people the last 10 years of their life, which is something called the decade of decline. And one of the biggest indicators within the decade of decline is that their walking speed declines. And actually my client who was in his 70s, who I mentioned earlier, he was like trying to work with me on like a project to help older people walk faster, because some of them get to the point where they can't cross the street fast enough, and so they're actually at risk whenever they're going for their walks. So get them walking in a safe area first, where they don't really have to cross. I mean, depending on how quickly they walk, like if they can cross the street fully without being at risk of like getting hit by a car, they could walk, you know, pretty much anywhere. But if they are walking pretty slow, get them walking in a safe area like a park where they don't really have to cross the street, and that's a good first start. The next thing is doing some body weight stabilization exercises and balance exercises. And honestly, the best case scenario is to either send them to a personal trainer who specializes in working with older people, or a good physical therapist with really good ratings from older people, so you know that they're the right type of physical therapist for that. Because especially with older people, you always want to make sure that they have the right supervision for their technique, because if they get their technique wrong, their proneness of injury is quite high. So if you are able to get them that level of supervision, would be great. But if not, just doing, again, walking is a good way to start getting them a little bit fitter and just improving their health overall. And I think 8,000 steps a day for people over 60, it has been like proven in studies to reduce the risk of dying early by like 40 or 50%. And for people under 60, it's 10,000 steps a day to reduce the risk of dying early by I think over 50%. There was like actually a study on this with a lot of participants. And then the stabilization exercises like planks, stuff like that. I mean, again, you might need to be careful because even that might be too hard for them. But if you get them a good supervision, it's going to make a huge difference. Oh, wow, there was brighter lights in here. I didn't even know that, mashallah. Okay, do you want to give the adhan? Okay. Wayakum. And real quick, before he gives the adhan, since we got about 5 minutes till iqama as well, I'm going to wrap it up here, and we'll so that people have time to make wudu and stuff like that. But inshallah, it was great to have you guys. Any questions you guys have after the prayer, please let me know, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair.